BlackRock just dropped an absolute bombshell. Their revenue from Bitcoin ETFs is now higher than what they make from the S&P 500. This means BlackRock will be betting even more on Bitcoin in the future, and that's a massive step towards higher Bitcoin prices. On top of that, we have Elon Musk, who apparently isn't just secretly buying Bitcoin and confirming it, but now there are even rumors that he might actually support a Bitcoin update. We'll take a look at what's really going on behind the scenes. There's a new trade deal in the US that has given a boost to both Bitcoin and the broader financial markets. Major statements from Caitlin Long on why stablecoins will continue to push Bitcoin forward, and now, watch out, attacks against Jerome Powell are reaching the next level. Fannie Mae, or rather Freddie Mae and Freddie Mac, I always say it the wrong way around, have now called for an investigation to remove Jerome Powell. We're seeing increasing pressure against the Fed chairman, that is, the head of the central bank in the US. And I took a look at the OTC DAX here, which are now running dry and could offer potential for the next supply shock, But first, let's smash that like button down below. For Bitcoin, for new all-time highs, for higher Bitcoin prices, for the epic Valhalla bomb. We're not that far away from all-time highs anymore. Michael Saylor puts it very, very accurately. Bitcoin. Oh, look here, check out this bug. Do you see it? Go ahead and drop a like for the bug. Yay! Michael Saylor says it here. Bitcoin is money, everything else is credit. So this is sound money, and everything else is debt-based Ponzi junk. You should keep your hands off that stuff. And if you do, then only use those means to buy more Bitcoin. No, just kidding, do whatever you want. I'm just some conspiracy theorist here anyway. How could I possibly know what's right for you? Donald Trump also made a new trade deal here with Vietnam. After that, the Bitcoin price shot up, and I actually made the video with the straw hat yesterday. Afterwards, Bitcoin jumped up by 4% as well. Some say it was because of Donald Trump, others say it was because of my straw hat. Let me know in the comments below what you think caused it, and whether I should make more straw hat videos. There were also news sources from, let me check, from here, right, Bloomberg, who say that Donald Trump now has over 8% of his wealth in crypto. But there was also a report earlier from Forbes claiming he had over 50% in crypto. So that's a bit contradictory. And we all know that Donald Trump wants to get rid of Jerome Powell here. Now, in fact, the chairman of the US housing authorities or housing agencies, as well as from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, is calling on Congress to investigate Jerome Powell. So they definitely want to get rid of Jerome Powell here. J.D. Vance also commented on this a few days ago, saying Jerome Powell has to go. Donald Trump says he has to go. Here, Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, I always say it wrong, guys, I just can't get it right. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, Freddie Krug, Mac, I don't know, man. Anyway, they're investigating or want to investigate Jerome Powell here, and it's probably all part of a big Trump agenda that's supposed to put pressure on Jerome Powell now. That would, of course, mean that we would have even more excessive monetary policy here, which is long-term positive for Bitcoin. And now let's move on to the other topics, to Elon Musk, to BlackRock, and much more. Above all, the BlackRock story is shining as very, very relevant here. Yesterday, we already had the situation where I reported that Elon Musk liked a tweet about whether Elon Musk is secretly buying Bitcoin. And he liked the tweet. Many people interpreted it as like, yeah, Elon Musk is now a Bitcoin supporter. And now there was another story. So, CoinJoin Chris writes here, hey, I gave you another 500 followers since yeah, honestly, it doesn't really matter what he's writing here. What's important is what he writes underneath here. Let's activate CTV plus CSFS. Let's get Bitcoin. He was just joking around here. And then he liked an account here, Elon Musk, Bitcoin Backup, or yeah, Bitcoin Backup or something like that is the name. And now people are saying that this is Elon Musk's account. But you also have to be clear here, this is, yeah, very likely a parody account, not necessarily Elon Musk's actual account. And he writes here, unshaking. Elon Musk supports CTV. So CTV here stands for Check Template Verified and is basically a kind of scaling update for Bitcoin that a lot of people support. Some people are critical of it, though. A lot of people here are very, very conservative when it comes to developing Bitcoin further. And yeah, now the question is this the real Elon Musk? Or is it not the real Elon Musk? The real Elon Musk actually liked the first tweet. The second tweet is probably more of a fake or just for fun or something like that. So you probably shouldn't take this too seriously. But what's more important is that he basically showed support here, that he might be secretly buying Bitcoin. But that wasn't really the big story here. The truly relevant story is what's happening here with BlackRock right now. We see here, wow, and we also see a post from Bitwise from Matthew Siegel who shared this. BlackRock Bitcoin ETFs drive more revenue than its S&P fund, the S&P 500 fund. And you can see here, for example, the IBIT, that is the BlackRock ETF, has annual fees of $187.2 million US with 75 billion in assets under management, while the IVV, with almost 8 times the fund volume, 624 billion, has, oh, I just said that wrong. So IVV has 187.1 million in annual fees, so less. And that's with 9 times the fund volume. You can see here that Bitcoin is much, much more profitable than traditional finance. In this case, almost 9 times more profitable. With IBIT, we have fees of 0.25%, which could even increase in the future, meaning there could be even more profitability. And with IVV, you have fees of just 0.03%. Of course, it's also possible that fees could go down due to the market and increased competition. That could also be the case. But in any case, we can see, of course, BlackRock also has a financial interest in pumping up the Bitcoin price. Not only do they now have Bitcoin on their balance sheet and therefore have an interest in pumping up the Bitcoin price, but they also have an interest in pumping up the Bitcoin price because that's where they get the highest margin. And what's interesting is the higher the Bitcoin price rises, the more demand there is for IBIT, the more money they can make, and the more products they can offer in this direction. And especially with such complex, layered products, they're probably going to make a lot of money, like all those model portfolios, where BlackRock is now even including their own Bitcoin ETFs, and IBIT has been attracting massive capital from institutions and retail investors for 18 months now. IBIT holds over 55% of all Bitcoin ETF assets, booming thanks to regulatory approval in the US, with inflows from hedge funds, pension funds, and banks. And now the question is, why is this relevant for Bitcoin? As I already said, number go up, of course. And one of the main points is simply that capital follows returns. Bitcoin outperforms traditional assets, even when compared to products with lower assets under management. What this means is that even though the fees are there and the assets under management are 9 times higher, they still can't outperform here if we compare Bitcoin with the S&P 500, at least from BlackRock's perspective. Right now, we're seeing a shift in narrative from gambler's coin to the top revenue product of the world's largest asset manager. And do you know what happens when BlackRock takes the lead here and it becomes a story like, hey, BlackRock is making so much profit, what do other asset managers do then? What do other hedge funds do? What do other banks do? And so on. Why are all these Bitcoin banks popping up now? Because of course they realize, hey, there are revenue streams here. We have massive opportunities here, and Bitcoin is really just getting started. That means there's still so much capital that can be drawn in. Just look at this, with almost 2 trillion in assets under management, not assets under management, but a market capitalization of 4 for Bitcoin, IBIT can already generate such huge revenues here. Just imagine if we really reach the levels that many people envision for Bitcoin, like a 20 trillion market cap, 100 trillion, 150 trillion market cap, then we're talking about almost 100 times the current revenue here, or maybe not quite, but maybe 50 times the current revenue. And then BlackRock would be operating on a level that's almost unimaginable. Then BlackRock would probably be making almost all of its profits just from Bitcoin if we put it in relation to their other products. Of course, that's not entirely true. In absolute numbers, it's not entirely accurate, but in relative terms, the percentage returns from Bitcoin, or rather, not returns, but the performance in terms of fees, will be so significant for BlackRock that the main focus will increasingly shift to Bitcoin simply because of financial incentives. And in the long run, that means more adoption, more liquidity, and more political balance for Bitcoin. That also means more lobbying for Bitcoin because BlackRock will of course get involved, do their lobbying, push for better regulations, and higher Bitcoin prices. That's how simple the calculation is here. And that's the point. Do you really want to bet against BlackRock here? I always tell you this, and I've asked you this question before. Do you want to bet against Donald Trump, against the Trump administration, against BlackRock, against Michael Saylor? Do you want to bet against all the big players? In my opinion, it's better to be on board with BlackRock, with Larry Fink, with Michael Saylor, and so on, than to bet against them. And now let's take a look at why Caitlin Long is so bullish on Bitcoin, driven by stablecoins.
Do you think that the frenzy for holding Bitcoin will last as long as we've seen it last up until now? Now that crypto is just becoming an infrastructure layer, why persist with the kind of enthusiasm for Bitcoin when crypto is now so much more than that?
Yeah, great question, Kelly. I look at stablecoins as an on-ramp to Bitcoin because, especially in the developed world, we have a relatively stable banking system and relatively stable currencies. But Bitcoin, frankly, we wouldn't have as much enthusiasm for Bitcoin, wouldn't have had up until this point, if there weren't so much money printing and so much debasement of fiat currency around the world. In the developed world, of course, it's not been as much as in certain other countries. But frankly, the fact that Tether in particular was able to tap into emerging markets, really, I think they've recently said they've served 430 million active monthly users, a stunningly large number. And they're serving people who may make $1 or $2 a day in wages in places that don't even have access to electricity, for example. And so that's bringing a whole new demand for the US dollar into the markets. And clearly, President Trump and Secretary Bessent are embracing that.
So that's what's interesting here. She says here that stablecoin adoption is very, very important, especially in third world countries. And yeah, it's just the case that in those places, you can't necessarily jump straight into Bitcoin if you simply don't have enough money to set aside and save. But then a stablecoin is pretty bad, and stablecoins are being pushed. The US dollar is being pushed like that. And additionally, when the stablecoin market capitalization increases, it naturally becomes more interesting to attract other capital. Even more capital will flow into stablecoins, and a portion of that stablecoin capital will always flow back into Bitcoin, which is bullish for Bitcoin. That's why she says here that there's a bit of a correlation between stablecoin adoption and Bitcoin adoption. I've always told you that stablecoins indirectly push Bitcoin, and Bitcoin in turn has so far indirectly pushed stablecoins, although you have to be a bit critical of stablecoins because they're still fiat money, money that can still be printed out of thin air. But maybe, yeah, in third world countries, it's better to have a US dollar stablecoin than Zimbabwean money, which inflates by 50% or so. So from that perspective, I can understand the argument. Now, I've received an interesting question from Adrian about the OTC market, whether the OTC market is on the verge of collapsing, because you hear that from time to time. Here you can first see the regular Bitcoins on the exchanges. You can see that. There are fewer and fewer Bitcoins on the exchanges here. There are always slightly different numbers, too. Currently, it's probably around 2 to 2.5 million Bitcoins on the exchanges, and the fewer Bitcoins you see on the exchanges, the higher the Bitcoin price goes. And it's exactly the same game here with the OTC desks, so over the counter. Here you can see there are almost no Bitcoins left on the OTC desks. And now the question is, okay, what kind of impact does that have on the Bitcoin price? Could the collapse of the OTC market happen here? Because people have been saying that for about a year or so now. And you have to be a bit careful here because on the one hand, that's true, but on the other hand, it's also not true. I just showed you the graphic as well. You can generally see the amount of Bitcoin on exchanges, which keeps decreasing, and that's also a major catalyst because the fewer Bitcoins there are on exchanges, the faster and more dramatically the Bitcoin price can shoot up. That's because the Bitcoin price isn't measured against the total 21 million, but rather against the Bitcoins that are actually on the exchanges. And the fewer Bitcoins there are here, the higher the multiplier can get. That means, for example, if the Bitcoin price really starts to rise and there's strong demand, then a single dollar flowing into Bitcoin could increase the market capitalization by $5 or $6. Bank of America has even talked about a multiplier of 100, meaning it could change by a factor of 100. And with little capital, the Bitcoin price can rise relatively quickly if there are only a few coins on the exchanges. And it's the same with the OTC market. It's hard to see through. How do you actually measure the OTC market? Do you include the miners, or do you not include the miners? It's not just a single OTC market, but rather a whole lot of different OTC desks. I mean, you can generally say the trend is that there are fewer and fewer Bitcoins on the OTC markets and on the exchanges, but something like this can never really collapse because if the Bitcoin price gets high enough, then eventually there's an incentive again to send Bitcoin to the OTC desks or to the exchanges. That means something like this can't really collapse. It can just happen that at certain thresholds there are very, very few coins on the markets, but it probably can't collapse, and a collapse would actually be good for all the hodlers. That means the more the exchanges can't keep up, the more the OTC desks are emptied out, the faster price jumps to the upside can happen here, of course. This has also happened repeatedly during peak phases, where sometimes even the exchanges couldn't keep up with KYC procedures and new people couldn't register anymore. There were even times when trading was stopped for certain periods, of course not for long, but for short intervals, where you couldn't trade or buy Bitcoin anymore because there was simply so little liquidity available. And that's maybe something I can add to that. Yeah, guys, as you can see, there's almost no light left, but I'm still here. Let me know in the comments below how you assess the current situation. If you still want to buy Bitcoin, look, I was about to say that's the moon back there, but it's just a street lamp. If you still want to buy Bitcoin, I'll put a link for you below to 21 Bitcoin. Here you can buy Bitcoin really easily, safely, and simply. Here you can buy Bitcoin really easily, safely, and simply. Now I'm confused because it's too dark here. Here you can buy Bitcoin really easily, safely, and simply. With the code Bitcoin Hotel, you can still get up to 20% off the fees when buying Bitcoin, and I'll see you soon. See you then, peace out.